Yeah, the other part I was going to add is some of these videos, if I want to get the thoughts out first, I'll write them up and then I'll set them on the teleprompter mode. And the teleprompter moves a little bit slow, so there's a lot more pausing in between what I'm saying. And that's probably a good thing because I'm not using one right now, but it helps people have a little bit more space to kind of receive the information I'm putting out there. Multi-layered. So, yeah, another thing I'm noticing around town too is I'm noticing a few different places where they have just tons of car lots out there. Or, I mean, they have like a bunch of cars, like 30, 50, 70 of them in certain parking lots that have nothing to do with car lots. And it's because the car industry, the inventory is piling up and they need somewhere to store all these things. So that'll happen also with real estate. It sounded to me like NARS is opening the MLS to everybody now or something. I don't know. So you hear of off-market stuff, not MLS stuff. So people are trying to move properties. The inventory's out there. There's a lot of delisting, so that's pent-up demand as well. People just keep waiting around for the interest rates to drop. But as the economy becomes more fragile, you see the multi-layer and the multidimensional and the motivation of the sellers and all the systems within systems and how nested it all is, and you're going to see the deleveraging and an unwinding spiral of it all, you are going to want to get to the point where you find the motivated sellers. You want to be part of that two-sided marketplace. And where I see this play out is the first Tuesday at MNREIA. They've been doing it for about 23 years, and it's at 7 o'clock they start off the meeting and there's people get on the mic and there's people that talk about they have stuff to sell. Sometimes they're wholesalers, sometimes they are the motivated sellers, sometimes they usually, they're all investors. And then the wholesalers aren't necessarily wholesaling other investors' properties. It could just be, regular homeowner that paid too much or just can't get rid of it. And then you got the investor buyers. A lot of those times investor buyers are flippers. They have cash or hard money. And sometimes they just want really good terms to buy and hold. And they're problems to each other's solutions to each other's problems, and vice versa. And it's a good learning experience to get a lot of different perspectives. You'll find out your positioning in the marketplace. It's a super positioning in a way because there's people in two different states. But it's also you figure out your own positioning because the investor gets to figure out if they're offering enough money up front, if they're paying enough of a down payment. So kind of get an idea. And I think that's the reason for connecting and networking with a lot of people. You understand your positioning. And then on the seller side, the wholesaler, motivated seller, they will understand their positioning. If they're offering a cheap enough price, where that gap is, and then they'll realize if they're giving good enough terms, right? I mean, in a perfect world, the investor would like 0% down, 0 interest rate, 10-year balloon, stuff like that. But there's an alignment, there's a negotiating between the two, bridging that gap. And it takes both the investor buyer and the investor sellers to do that. But they got to understand that negotiating, just like you see on the pawn shows and if you look online, Chasing Cardboard's one of the channels, but just people that negotiate on baseball cards and what the value is today. The prices are always fluctuating. I mean, we're seeing a downward spiral, obviously, with the economy and housing prices. If you want to gauge how fast it's nosediving, we are not seeing a lot of comps because we're seeing a 30-year low right now on regular retail transactions because sellers aren't being reasonable about their pricing. They still want 2021 pricing, and the buyers want 2028 pricing. They know where this is going. So you're going to see not a lot of comps in the MLS and for the retail. So if you want to see some liquidity and you want to see some stuff moving, wholesalers and whatever, and you want to get some kind of comps of what's going on in the wholesale world, because it's just different perspectives. Sure, you can get a comp 8 months sitting on the market. There's people in Florida, they'll get a comp, but it takes them a year and a half to sell it. Some of those condos out there, especially with the HOAs, they're 2-3 years of inventory out there, especially near Fort Myers. So they'll get comps, so they got to wait 3 years for them. So if you don't want to wait that long for comps and you want the mark-to-market, you want to know where things are sitting, you need to, just like you would on the MLS, you want to see sold comps, just figure out what people are saying out there. Just figure out what they're saying. They're talking about it at First Tuesday, MNREIA, 7 p.m. They just, the haves and wants. They get on the mic and this is what I'm looking to buy. This is where I'm at based on my pricing of where I see it being projected. And the other people are like, well, this is what price I'm willing to let go since I know it's not 2021 anymore. So get out there and move some properties, check out where the market's at and what things are getting liquidated at. Yeah, so real estate's really been growing since about 2012 in Minnesota. And when I get some of these ideas, the timing of it, the inspired action of it, I don't know whether to just roll with it and start doing an audio video like this, or if I do it later on in the day. I'm certain that I'm going to do it most of the time because it gives me clarity. But the timing of it, I never really know. Is it if I just do it right now, whatever comes to mind flows through me, does that remove the resistance where it offers more space for more ideas to come in later on? Or do I give myself 4 or 5 hours to get more clarity, more rendering, more alignment before I decide to talk about this? And it's different every time, but I wanted to give you this analogy. So the human mind, the story, the identity loves to live in space-time. So let's say there's a kind of a collective story in a way where if people were to look at the data and everything, Minnesota real estate's been growing since 2012. And there's been a lot of action taken since then, a lot of different perspectives, but fear of missing out would be one. But there's this like continuity of linear growth for the mind and the story and the identity, and it's kind of like acquire, cash out, refi, cash out, refi, acquire, cash out, refi. And it's a very linear growth. But the Alan Watts video I often share about everything's multidimensional, it's a compounding. It's multi-layered, different planes, like Ram Dass talks about. And so the self-awareness needs to understand that the mind lives within a bigger system of different perspectives. So high interest rates, low interest rates, inflation, deflation, different market cycles. You got to be self-aware that there's a lot of stuff going on. So analogy that I was thinking of in the last 10 minutes is I walk a lot every day, and if you just focus on the green light and the linear of just going through green lights as fast as you can, I'm in a rush, hurry, hustle, grind. I'm just going to go through green lights as fast as I can because I'll get there faster. I'm making enough money that, pay the speeding ticket, the higher insurance, who cares, right? Just moving as fast as you can. Well, you still have to be self-aware that there's other people playing by other rules that are also not self-aware, that could be running red lights and stuff like that. So I walk a lot, and if I go through the walk sign which says walk, I told you to walk, just walk. Oh, okay. If I always did that, without being self-aware of vehicles coming from multi-dimensional locations, others going through red lights. I'm in a hurry, I'm frantic, I have this thing that I'm letting play out, or it has me hurrying through traffic and all that stuff. If I walked every time it told me to walk, I'd say in the last 3 years I'd either be dead 50 times or in the hospital, very injured 50 times. That is not the rule I live by. The lights, the walking sign. I realize I have to be self-aware of everything around me, but I have to be focused. So the U.S. economy works very much the same way. There's government shutdowns, there's high interest rates, low interest rates, inflation, deflation, rising expenses for housing and all that kind of stuff. You know, if you have some rental properties in a townhouse development, condo development, and 3 of your neighbors who end up being your comps have a backstory, that underlying story would probably be a better way to explain it, and you don't understand what's happening, and something happens in their situation in their life, they sell 3 properties, 3 different individuals sell 3 different properties, and they feel like they painted themselves in the corner and they're going to give the keys back to the bank. So now they're going to sell those properties quickly for $60,000 less. They're not very expensive townhomes, so that's a huge hit. But they all feel very hurried to sell them very quickly. Well, now the other people in the development all have their own stories, right? And some of them might say, well, I was going to sell my town home and put my kid through college, or I was going to go on those vacations, I was going to buy that new car, and now I can't because my neighbor a few of my neighbors sold their property for $60,000 less, and they were in a big hurry. I wasn't in a big hurry, and now those are my new comps, and that $60,000 vanished, and now I can't do any of those things. So now you're kind of dependent on external things, and it's really the over leverage of dependency and not being self-aware of what could happen, right? It could also happen where people say, well, my personal economy was so good, I didn't actually have to sell. I just wanted to do a cash out refi and pull that money out so I could go on vacation or put my kids through college or buy a new vehicle because the other one isn't good. And through what feels like no fault of their own, because they're pretty strong with their personal economy with their townhome, and that is their net worth. Half of these refis are getting rejected based on the stats out there, 45% plus. So even if they say, well, I've really managed my credit well and all this other stuff, so I think I might get approved. Okay, great. Kept a job, whatever. But you got to understand that now those comps have come down $60,000 with the neighbors. So those comps are used in the cash out refi, and now there's no cash out to refi. And even if there was, it was probably a higher interest rate, right? Because those interest rates never really came down. So now all of a sudden, this person's like, well, I was in such a strong position with my credit score that I didn't need to sell. I was just going to do a cash out refi because I was told the interest rates would drop at some point. And they didn't. So, but the neighbors, which they didn't know, maybe lost their jobs, or unfortunately there was a death in the family, or some other thing wasn't working out, and that was what they needed to do, is sell that property right away. Maybe they got a job transfer out of state and they just had to sell real quickly. So the other comps around them are affecting the other people's lives, and it's kind of a race to the bottom on the pricing, right? So that's where the economy and housing gets kind of interesting, as it's more multidimensional, and we're going to see through the deflation of assets and the inflation of the cost of real estate, right? So we saw what seemed like a linear growth of appreciation, and now we're see a deflation of that. When we say inflation adjusted, it's like you could have put your money somewhere else at some point, meaning like inflation's actually going up higher than the price. The leverage is actually working against you. We think of shrinkflation with stuff. That's another hidden inflation. We don't talk enough about how we're kind of forced to do self-checkout and kiosk and wait 30 minutes on hold with people. That's kind of another lifestyle outsourcing. The company's profits aren't really there. This is all happening in different ways, whatever you want to call it. And so it's just something that people need to be self-aware of, is it gets so busy sometimes in their own linear story that there's a multi-dimensional story unfolding around them in the overall housing economy. And as the deleveraging happens, it's going to feel different for everyone all around you. And people just need to be open to that.
Human intelligence has a very serious limitation. That limitation is that it is a scanning system which is linear. It examines the world in lines. That's why our education takes so long. We have to scan miles of lines of print. Now, the universe does not come at us in lines. It comes at us in a multidimensional continuum in which everything is happening all together everywhere at once. And it comes at us much too quickly to be translated into lines of print, and that is our limitation so far as the intellectual life and the scientific life is concerned.